The International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is your embassy in the heart of Israel, founded in 1980. From our headquarters in Jerusalem through our branches in over 80 nations and yours in Canada, we seek to challenge the Church to take up its scriptural responsibilities, to remind Israel of the promises made to her in the Bible, and to be a source of practical assistance to all the people in the land of Israel. On today's program, a visit to Canada Park in Israel. Experience and learn about the biblical reserve in the Holy Land, and a continuation of A Fountain of Tears, an artist's depiction of the crucifixion and the Holocaust.
Hello, I'm Donna Holbrook, and today we're talking about the Feast of Tabernacles. We read in Leviticus 23:42-43, God told Moses to command the people, "On the first day you shall take the fruit of beautiful trees." This would be the etrog, which is a citrus fruit, and the branches of palm trees, and the boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook. And you shall live in booths 7 days. All citizens in Israel shall live in booths, in order that future generations may know that I made the Israelite people live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. Now there are 7 feasts on the Lord's calendar, but 3 of them are pilgrimage feasts. 3 times a year, all the Jews would come to the temple in Jerusalem for the festivals of Passover, Shavuot, which is Pentecost, and Sukkot, which is the Feast of Tabernacles. According to the prophet Zechariah, in the Messianic era, Sukkot will become a universal festival, and all nations will make pilgrimages annually to Jerusalem to celebrate the feast there. You read that in Zechariah 14:16-19. Sukkot is agricultural in origin. This is evident from the biblical name, the Feast of Ingathering, from the ceremonies accompanying it. Sukkot is the festival of joy, a time when the people of God are to rejoice greatly at the Scripture's command that the people of God are to be a joyful people. There's also a festival of reliance. It declares that we are totally dependent upon God. Therefore, as the harvest comes in, we rejoice in His provision. In John 7, we find that Jesus celebrated Sukkot too, when He and His disciples made their way from Galilee to Jerusalem, where He taught in the temple. From the time that the temple was built in Jerusalem, it was forbidden to offer sacrifices in other places. It was a time of great celebration. It was said that whoever didn't see the celebrations in the temple on Sukkot never saw a great celebration in their life.
Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, "When you come into the land which I give you, then the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather its fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord."
Between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem is Canada Park, and here is Jessica to tell us, why is it called Canada Park?
Well, it's actually the Ayalon Canada Park, because we have the Ayalon Valley that comes through here as well. And towards the end of the 1960s, the Canadian community adopted this park, and you'll find that if you travel through Israel, there are various different parks that have been adopted by different countries. You'll find British Park, American Independence Park, and this was adopted by the Canadian community. And so since the beginning of the 1970s, this has been the Ayalon Canada Park.
Excellent. I understand that you have a John Diefenbaker Road that runs through the park. He was one of our prime ministers.
We do indeed. It starts from further up in the hills that go up towards Jerusalem, and then lead down towards the edges of the park. So yes, we have a strong Canadian connection here.
You do, and the Jewish National Fund formed this particular park and all the other parks, but you also maintain it on a regular basis, don't you?
We do. We are the caretakers as well of open spaces. So we have different issues of intensive use and extensive use. So there are certain parts of Canada Park even which are for intensive use, where we invite the public to come in, and we also have extensive areas that we want to stay more natural as well for the future. So visitors that come, we have 2 tree planting centres in the country. There's one 10 minutes from here in Nachshon Forest, and there's
Right.
one up at Golani Junction.
Golani Junction, which we were just talking about, that is where ICJ Canada has a grove of trees,
Yep.
and we can go there and plant. There's certain times of years, or there's every 7 years, that we do not plant. Would you like to tell us about the Shemitah year?
The Shnat Shemitah, as you said, is
Yes.
every 7 years, with the idea being that the soil needs to rest. So every 7 years we let the soil rest, and we don't do the plantings and we don't do the growing of agriculture, and we let the soil build itself up again.
It's a little bit like the Shabbat, isn't it, to the
It
week?
is indeed. It is indeed.
And you shall take for yourselves on the first day the fruit of beautiful trees, branches of palm trees, the boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God for 7 days. You shall keep it as a feast to the Lord for 7 days in the year.
Welcome to Neot Kidumim. Neot Kidumim is such a unique place in the world. Probably, maybe you know of others, but as far as I know, it's the only biblical nature reserve that there is. What is a biblical nature reserve? It is 625 acres of land that was taken from nothing and created. Was it created in a factory? No. It was planted. It was grown from scratch by one man who had an inspiration, was inspired to recreate the land of the Bible. He wanted people to be able to come and learn and leave the walls of their churches and their synagogues and their schools and their Hebrew schools and be able to come and see the Bible. Okay? Everybody, each and every one of us has sat in a classroom and learned Bible stories, and there's a lot of words in this. My Bible has 2,000 and something pages in it. However, there can't be any better way of learning than to come out and not just to read it, but to hear it and to see it and to taste it and to touch it and to feel it. And that is what we have tried to do here. This is what we try to recreate for everybody, for Jewish school children, for Christian pilgrims, for Jewish students, for the entire world market. I guide Chinese groups who have never even heard of the Bible. They come here and they get to learn about the Bible when they come here as well. For them, they are just stories. For us, it's real. And we can see how real it is when we stand here and we look at this background in front of us. Okay, if we look at this area here, this is the land that Jesus walked. And there in the north, looking straight over, is the north and the town of Nazareth. Jesus was coming from Nazareth in the north up to Jerusalem in the southeast. This is the way he would have walked. This is the old route to Jerusalem. These are the trees and the hills and the landscapes he would have seen. Let me read you something from the book of Psalms. Psalm number 104. He waters the mountains from his upper chambers. The earth is satisfied by the fruit of his work. He makes grass grow for the cattle and plants for man to cultivate, bringing forth food from the earth, wine that gladdens the heart of man, oil to make his face shine, and bread that sustains his heart. This is the land that Jesus grew up in. This is the nature that he saw. This is the land that he worked, that he toiled. He celebrated his agricultural festivals, and this was the land that inspired him to talk in his parables all about nature, and especially about the basics that we need to sustain life, the bread and the wine and the oil. And Noga Reuveni in 1964 took a landscape which looked exactly like those hillsides over there, with nothing on them, a barren landscape which had nothing. And he took this 625 acres, which was given to him by David Ben-Gurion as a gift in order to recreate this reserve. And Noga Reuveni went with a Bible, Old Testament and a New Testament in one hand, a shovel in the other, and planted and planted and planted. And the results of which we can see on this hillside here, the regreening of this hillside, the recreating of the original land flowing with milk and honey. Thousands of years ago, the children of Israel were promised a land flowing with milk and honey. And when Joshua crossed over with them into the land, this is the land that they received, a rich land, a green land, a fertile land, a good grazing land. Milk and honey was what was said to talk to the children of Israel, because they were shepherds. They wanted to hear what their flock was going to eat, where they were going to graze. And they came into a very green and beautiful land. Over thousands of years, unfortunately, the land of milk and honey was taken away. For thousands of years of conquering, of wars, of invaders, of people that came here because politically and geographically it was a great place. However, they didn't care about the land itself, and the land flowing with milk and honey disappeared. However, we created it and we planted everything back here in order so that you could again see what the original land of milk and honey looked like. However, we have to think about exactly what was planted here. Now, we don't know. Years of research Noga's parents spent their whole lives researching what was written in the Bible to see if that was exactly what was growing here today. We don't know what survived, what didn't. Some things were obviously clear. We know that we had here the 7 species. The children of Israel wandered into the land in the book of Deuteronomy. They were told by God when they were crossing the desert, and they were having a bit of a hard time. They were tired, they were hungry, they were thirsty, they were complaining a little bit. So what did God do when they were complaining? He gave them clues as to what they were going to see when they got here. Clues to help them, to give them the courage to go on. So if we go to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 8, verse 8. It's an easy one to remember. Chapter 8, verse 8. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and springs and fountains issuing from plain and hill, a land of wheat and barley, of vines, figs and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey. So we know that was what was here thousands of years ago. And now it's easy to identify the 7 species. And of course, those 7 species were planted here. Over the next hour or so, we will see them. We can already see over there, standing tall and proud, a beautiful date palm where the dates have already just finished. You have to understand that when you come to this land, we are in tune with the seasons as they are talked about in the Bible. The agricultural festivals, the Passover and the Pentecost and the Tabernacles and everything that they celebrate is exactly what happens at these times of year. So you are here right now. We are after the Feast of Tabernacles. This is now the harvesting season. You won't see wheat and barley blowing in the wind. You will see the first shoots of the wheat and barley growing up, and we will go and see that later. You won't see dates on the trees, because what are the Feast of Tabernacles? It's also called the Feast of the Ingathering. The gathering in of what? Of the fruits that have been ripened, and gathering them in order to dry them out so that you will have food in the winter. There were no freezers, there was no vacuum packing. There was drying of fruits and grapes to sultanas, dried dates, dried figs, grapes being turned into wine, the grain, the wheat and the barley being put away for the winter. Because what happened on the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles? We start praying for rain. That's when we start praying for rain, not before then. It's when we've gathered in all of the grains. So all of those things didn't exist during the winter. They had to survive on what was dried, what was here.
I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, bears much fruit, for without me you can do nothing. Previously on Inside Israel with ICEJ Canada.
Actually born in Toronto, and then when I was about 19-20, went to British Columbia. And I thought to myself, if there's a God, and I'm beginning to think that there is, he must have something to do with these Jews. I have to go and see this place. So I decided then that I would work on a kibbutz for 6 months.
Let's take a look at what you've created here. It's 12 feet by 60 feet long. It's the Fountain of Tears.
The second panel is Today You Will Be With Me in Paradise. Historically, there were 2 thieves crucified with Jesus. These 3 men each speak out of their last moments of life. The left hand of the crucifixion is responding to the cursing of the one thief. The right hand is pulling hard towards the stones, drawn to the other thief, asking to be remembered. The Holocaust is holding his hands in 2 directions, identifying with these 2 cries of the thieves. He knows that within the camps death was always only a few moments away. He identifies with the cries cursing God and also the cries begging to be remembered. The third panel is Mother, this is your son. Son, this is your mother. The sense on this word is the creation of an unnatural relationship being formed out of intense suffering. From the crucifixion, Jesus is asking John, his closest disciple, to carry Mary as if she is now his mother. Therefore John becomes, as it were, her son. The figure of the Holocaust is carrying a heavy cloth that has the surreal woman's figure interwoven into the folds. From the suffering of the Holocaust, the survivor carries forever an unnatural relationship to the 6 million who perished. The fourth panel is my God, why have you forsaken me? The crucifixion is at his deepest point of pain. He has been abandoned. The question, where is God, is cried upward. He is searching with his last breath. It is documented that many going into the gas chambers were consistently repeating Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? The Holocaust survivor is throwing his arms behind him, throwing himself and this word through time. Where was God? In this panel, the identification between the crucifixion and the Holocaust is so strong that the figure crucified also has his head shaved and his arm numbered. The fifth panel is I thirst. In his life, Jesus referred to himself as the source of living water. He said that if any man thirst and would come to him, that person would never thirst again. However, he now thirsts. The body is hanging, everything is being drained downward. The feet pointed almost like the last drop. The Holocaust is crouched. The hands are two-directional. The one hand searching, looking for the water that satisfies the spirit. The other almost touching the feet, understanding a thirst that can kill the body. The sixth panel is It is complete. In this there is another declaration. The face is serious and intentional. The hands are covering nail heads. His work is finished. The primary place of Jewish identity and history before the war was Poland. Jewish people had lived in Poland almost 1,000 years. They were destroyed within 6. The Holocaust, in touching the word complete, is covering his face, a complete loss of identity. The other hand in the air, looking for direction but finding none, a complete loss of direction and history. The seventh panel. Into your hands I commend my spirit. In the crucifixion, death now has come, and the figure hangs at its lowest state. There is nothing left to be given. The Holocaust figure has collapsed under the mantle of death. Most survivors had no direction. They had to be interned in the same concentration camps. Between 1945 and 1948, it was as though the survivors were buried with the perished. It is characteristic for a survivor to constantly feel compelled to remember the dead, and it is as though the dead are saying to the living, "Into your hands we commend our spirits and our memory." The Butterfly. This piece was inspired by a book of children's poetry from the Holocaust called I Never Saw Another Butterfly. The child is on the inside of the crematorium, cut off, abandoned. On the other side of the door, which is a copy of the oven doors from Auschwitz, you see the hand of the child penetrating this door and clutching a small piece of ground. From the crematorium, they possess the land, but like the butterfly, they never see it. Empty cup. This final piece shows the two personalities from this dialogue of suffering coming together. Both the Holocaust and the crucifixion are coming out of the stones that reflect the perished into an embrace, a recognition of each other. They are both under the shadow of the cup of sorrows, once full, now empty, drunk by both.
Thank you for joining us today, and be sure to visit our website at www.icejcanada.tv. 100% of what we receive from you toward a project goes to that designation. Through your contribution to ICEJ Canada, you can participate by giving to Bet Singer Children's Orphanage Bathrooms, Christian Friends of Yad Vashem, Home for Holocaust Survivors, Israeli Youth at Risk Summer Camp in Canada, Operation Life Shield Bomb-Proof Shelters, Red Carpet Project Women at Risk in Tel Aviv, Shoulder to Shoulder New Immigrant Partner Project, Women's Shelter Project, General Fund, Gift Estate Securities Funds, ICEJ Communication Media Fund.
And in their panic, they flee all the way down to Jericho. There they meet with soldiers of King All of them, they manually